What up, Tej?
What up, dude?
Pretty excited because today we get to talk about how to release the golf club. Let's go.
Let's go. So,
We're talking hand things, forearm things,
yes, sir.
club face things. We're talking release.
Yes, yeah. I'm very curious about it, and one of our most asked for topics to kind of dive deeper into. So.
Sure, absolutely. I think what would be great is, if you're familiar with our channel or it's the first time you've ever watched us, we coach in this systems-based approach,
Yes.
meaning that systems have bookends to them where there's space in here that would be adequate, right?
Yes.
Like this is where we want to be, and then if you run out of that bookend, you're in Faultsville,
Yep.
right? Again, it's more difficult to hit good shots over here. And then the same thing on this end. So I think what would be nice is to maybe explain both of those bookends.
Okay.
And then players can decide based on their own preferences, what they need because of body movement,
Sure.
what they need for speed, what
Okay.
they need for precision. They can pick what type of release pattern is going to match best for them. So why don't we start at this almost in a way kind of fully unloaded phase or area, which is really about so P7 is impact. P8 is where the shaft gets level to the ground on the other side. Yes, exactly. And then if we even go one step further where the golf club, the shaft goes out of the ribs on this side, I mean, the sexy thing that everybody talks about, especially on social media, is almost the club face pointing back at the camera.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start here.
Okay, please do that, because I'm curious.
Sure. Well, and I want to hear your thoughts too,
Yeah.
Tej. I know you've been studying this stuff a lot, especially in release. So not every high-level player throughout the course of history has done that. And then if we go one step further.
This?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very few have in history done that, the
Yes.
great players.
I agree.
Okay?
I agree.
You see more of a release, if you could, through those ribs again, where the toe is rotating beautiful that way more. We see, the leading edge is right in here, and the toe is pointing on the plane line rather than the face pointing on the plane line.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when you're talking rate of rotation, everybody has this. The rate of rotation simply means is how aggressively is the face rotating through the impact zone. And now we're talking about low rate of rotation is a really good thing. It can be.
It can be for sure.
It can be catastrophic as well
Sure.
if implemented poorly. So you don't have to have this sexy look of the face pointing back towards the camera once it goes through the ribs.
Not a necessity.
Yeah.
And
In
maybe-
fact, we coach this shit.
Yeah.
Yours doesn't. Neither does mine.
Yeah. Well, I try hell to make mine do it, but it doesn't do it.
But when we're playing,
No, it's not.
You're
It's
playing
not
golf.
like I'm forcing this to go that way, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, if you look throughout the course of history, we got these great players. Woods,
Yep.
for the most part, rotates it,
Rotates it a bit.
right? You got these other guys, Jimmy Walker.
Rotates it even more.
Rotates it even
Yep.
more. John Rahm through there rotates a heck of a lot, right? So, it is not this huge necessity that we have a low rate of rotation.
No.
It can be great for some folks. But it can limit speed. It can limit all these different items that we really need as if we want to call ourselves golfing athletes. We want that stuff to feel good when we play.
Agreed.
Okay, so why don't we start with that end of the spectrum?
So kind of the tiger end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
Okay.
And by the way, even though we're talking about this point in space,
Yep.
this is not necessarily going to be an active thought to get there, to put the club there.
Sure.
It's going to happen
As a result of other forces.
passively because of another type of an idea.
Okay.
So if you just swing one up to P5-ish, all the way into P5, good. This is about delivery, fully loaded phase. From right here, to do this, what we'll want, and by the way, from here with every single player, we'll have some amount of vertical from the center of mass of the chest and the center of mass of the pelvis.
Okay.
And what that's going to allow for is this lead arm to lower. And as it's lowering, now all the forces are going down. You'd have to really go up and away to create that space. There you go. And now the flash out is this. Okay, so notice when you do that, TJ, if you can do that again for us. So this lowers, you're unwinding and rotating this. There you go. So if TJ from over here lowers this arm and lets it continue to go, eventually the humerus is rotating, like right here in the shoulder socket, it is rotating. This bone is going this way. Not because he's actively trying to make it like externally rotate, but it will externally rotate for every single player on Earth to some degree. Now, how early it happens because of shoulder flexion is what we're talking about.
Okay, so for that type of player, you'd have this lowering shoulder flexion action, and then that external rotation would happen very, very early for that type of player.
Earlier, exactly.
And then maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but if we're bouncing to other end of the spectrum, we call it like maybe Hovland.
Yep.
Right? Then he's got a little bit more internal for this early portion, and then that'll go later.
Yes, and a lot of that is based on the center of mass of the pelvis and where it's moving. So like with Rory, heavier face rotation kind of a guy. Like with driver, you'll see Rory through the strike look like that. Like it really goes. So the center of mass of his pelvis, like as he gets into P5 or so, let's take Rory versus Hovland at P5, because two different releasers. From right here, Rory will rotate in the center of mass of the pelvis, will be further forward through the strike to unload this. And so as he's rotating, meaning his pivot point is further, more bias into the lead side, not all the way here, but more like lead hip bias for pivot point, meaning he's rotating in this phase. This can lower, and as it lowers, the force that we get is this external rotation of the upper arm as he does that, and that'll rotate the face a little bit more aggressively.
Okay.
And so that type of a release in the hands will be more into a radial versus ulnar release. So think of a hammer, right? Load the hammer, unload the hammer, bam, bam, bam.
So as I kind of lower this club down with shoulder flexion, or this would be extension.
Yep.
Then the release is more of this ulnar idea.
And you won't, and the player won't even have to feel this.
It just happens.
It just happens.
Yep.
But we'll have two main like active thoughts there for that type of a player. Once I'm in 5.
Yep.
Okay. The pivot point will be further lead hip bias, right? So as he's unwinding, as TJ's unwinding, he's rotating here, and the other active thought is this lead arm will lower. And so you'll have these like guys that talk about like lowering the arms heavily. Like if you watch a bunch of Justin Rose's.
He's talking about lowering.
Yep. He's talking about lowering here, and then as he's rotating, he's in here. So Justin Rose, Rory, both have very similar tops of swing look. There's not a whole lot of bow in this lead wrist. In fact, with Rory, quite a bit of extension.
Yeah, interesting. Compared
to other players.
Sure.
Right? Like Hovland, who has a heck of a lot more bow. Yep, exactly. So that's another portion of the matchup for release is what type of player are you at the top? Also, how do you grip it? Like Morikawa, weaker grip.
Yep.
Bozit, heavier at the top. Rory, stronger grip. Yep, more radial at the top with the load in the hands or in the wrists.
Interesting.
So all this goes into release patterns. It's like all the some of the setup in the arms and the hands and how we're holding the golf club all the way into the load, right? And then how the player pivots is really key to this too. Because if I pivot more like Rory, where I'm up in here, the tendency is going to be now I'm going to lower this. And as I lower it and continue to rotate, then that flashes out. So Tej, if you could, let's set up next to it here and show us a couple, like this needs to be done for release, like for this to passively release, we need enough energy in it for it to actually go.
Okay.
So go to 5 for us. And again, the two active thoughts here are going to be lead hip pivot and lead arm lower and just bust it through here. There you go. Do that again. Roughly to 5. Okay, and go. Good. Now, are you trying to rotate the arms at all or rotate the club face?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. So that happens because there is a rotational aspect that we're talking about in the pelvis.
Okay.
And we're more lead hip bias there. Okay, and go ahead and do that again from face on now if you could, Tej. Okay. So we'll go to 5 and then the same map. Good. Do that again. Good. Now, as the athlete, do you feel the club releasing in a certain way? Like, does it feel like it rotates more?
I do feel it rotating more. Okay. Because I have a pretty good sense and awareness of what that's doing.
Yep.
But yeah, I do feel it rotating a little bit more, but it's not like I'm sitting here trying to
Yes.
like throw it that way. Right?
Exactly. And so I think it would be really important, like right now, to discuss this, and then we can kind of bounce this idea back and forth. A stable release in our minds, in our maps, is a player whose structure of the arms, meaning the humerus bones,
Okay.
are not going over one another. This is like not very stable. Like now we're yeah, exactly. So that would be
Unstable release.
Yep. Exactly. The other unstable release would be if I go here way too much. See, I'm actively moving these, like that's not stable either. Like, does the golf club look like it's anywhere near neutral? Yeah. In
It's
either
probably
one,
gonna kick anyway.
exactly, it's going to go anyway because I got to recover it late. Like we got issues now,
Sure.
right? And if you watch like our Instagram or any of like the shorts that we put up of some of our players, our job as coaches is to push the intention for certain movers into one of those types of feels. But what truly happens is
like
neither one of
neutral.
those.
Yeah.
We want neutral.
Yeah.
So stable simply means that the arm structure throughout the course of the swing, we're not really, we're not messing with that.
Yeah.
Whether the arm's lower here, and I'm a lead hip bias pivot kind of a player, the arms are still out in front of me here. And we see a ton of players like Faldo through history who's looked just like this, right? And then like the other type of a hit, which we'll get into here, is more of a lower and this ABAD hit. But the arm structure still is nice and sound. We haven't messed a whole lot with that.
Right.
What we're talking about more is like the rotation that we see in the hands, so this pronation and supination type of an act. But I'm still not messing with the upper arms.
Totally.
No. This is fine. If I'm turning with it, still have the golf club structured.
Sure.
That's stable.
Okay.
So rate of rotation is simply reading the rotation of the club face and how active it is. Rory, heck of a lot higher than Hovland's.
Yeah.
But you argue with me, who's the better ball striker?
That's a hard one.
Yeah, that's a beer conversation, right?
that's-
Rory's better. No, Hovland's better. Like that.
That's why spectrums is so important.
Exactly.
Because these guys arguably would be our bookends, right? Hovland's super low rate of rotation. McIlroy a little higher, but both insanely good ball strikers because by our definition of stable at this point, they both fit that criteria.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Their arms aren't doing anything like whack and crazy, especially through the hit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's hit a couple balls that way, Tej, if you
Right.
could. And you don't have to stop at 5. We'll just keep it going. But we've got our 2 active thoughts, which is more lead hip bias pivot.
Okay.
And then the lead arm is simply lowering when you're doing that. And you'll let the golf club just go. Feel it rotate more?
Yeah, that one kicked a bit for sure. Awesome.
Yep. By the way, lead hip is not that I'm taking this lead hip and just driving it towards the target.
Yeah.
It simply means that the pivot point would be in here, and so I'm rotating.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Yep.
I was kind of doing that there a little
Oh,
bit.
do you feel that in yours? Okay, good. There you go. Excellent. Excellent.
So there's still rotation in a lead hip pivot, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not that I just sway this over here and never
Exactly.
rotate.
Because if I just keep moving this lateral, there's no rotation.
Mm-hmm.
A pivot point means that there's something rotating around that point in space.
Got
And
it.
what we're doing, we're going to one extreme, which is a lead hip type pivot, which we
Right.
see some of that, right?
Need one more of those.
Yeah, one more of those. So probably what you'll feel, and again, it's not like you're trying to flash the club, but that passively happens because of an active
Yeah.
idea.
And
from
what
the
is
lead arm.
interesting though, like I don't feel it like kick right here.
Uh-huh.
It actually still feels relatively stable to here, and then it kicks late.
Yep. And so and again, personal to the player,
Okay.
what they actually sense. Like
Fair.
if we put a sense, like if we put hack motion
Yep.
on your hands, we would see that happen,
Sure.
right? At probably a higher rate through the hit, but you'll sense it at different times
Fair
based
enough.
on each individual player, which would be really cool for players to kind of mess with, which is
Okay.
great. Okay, so now we'll go to Hovland
Love it.
spectrum, okay?
We
Which
love Hovey.
we talk a lot about Hovland, okay, for a lot of different reasons, blah blah blah. Okay, so let's go to 5 again.
All right.
And here we go again with what's actually going to happen. We're going to shove the pivot point back in here. So this lead hip is going to go towards the screen and then away from the target. and this lead arm, this elbow, try to take and just move it towards my hand. There's the AB hit. This is abduction. This lead humerus came off of TJ's pec and moved in this space. So he's not looking to lower the golf club down to find the bottom out there, because if he's up here and he pivots here, right, now I'm going to go this way to control the bottom out, okay, and control the release. If I'm up here and then this is the pivot point, I'm moving, I'm in essence, I'm moving my center of mass of my pelvis forward so I can lower this to control the bottom out.
Okay.
Two different releases there.
Lead hip pivot's going to be an arm lowering action, and trail hip pivot's going to be a level hit action.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got
So
it.
let's start with that, and then we'll get into the passive release, which is in the hands.
Okay.
So go to 5 again for us, and we'll do a well, actually, yeah, you can hit this one.
Okay.
Just go to 5. Now we're going trail hip pivot, and lead arm goes across. There you go. Good.
Yeah, way more stable too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, right?
Well,
so
okay,
and when
definition of stable, right?
there you go.
Face was rotating less.
Yes. So
Both are
both
stable.
are stable.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. TJ's just referring to the rate of rotation in the club face. He'll feel it like almost never rotate. You know, like meaning that the face isn't tumbling this way.
Totally.
Yep. Okay. Hit us another one like that, but one constant motion.
Okay.
Into 5, trail hip pivot, and lead arm across, level hit. Different. And like when you're watching this, just to the naked eye, you'll see the differences in both of those different patterns. And again, the thing is, like, notice we don't, either is great. Like, again, we got Tiger. He was kind of good.
He's okay.
Yeah. And obviously, like, there's more to like his greatness. I mean, great putter, great mind, great short game, right? But we would also put Tiger in a great ball striking category because the stats talk about it.
Unequivocally.
Like, yeah, he was number 1 in, I think, strokes gained approach or irons, one of those categories, for a number of years.
Something that
Like,
wasn't matched
unbelievable.
until Scotty Scheffler of this past year, who also has some of that going on.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But then throughout the course of history, we got Lee Trevino.
We've got guys like that. Yep.
Yeah, and we got Hovland, who, I mean, that guy hits it unbelievably well.
Unbelievably well.
Mito,
Really good.
and like all these guys, like anybody that plays on tour,
Neiman's on a heater.
Neiman's on a heater.
Yeah.
I mean, shooting 59s and 60s is pretty darn good.
It's all right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, you see these different release patterns. So, like, who in the heck is to say that one is better than another? Like, again, it's a bar conversation. You're sitting there arguing with your buddy over preferences at this point.
Yep.
Okay. So, I think it'd be good to just explain, like, what type of a player each one of these, like, you can fill these buckets with different types of players. So, players that are searching for distance.
Okay.
Okay.
Would be
Lead, hip, pivot, and
Interesting.
arm lower guys.
interesting.
If you watch every single long drive athlete, they are all that type of a player. They extend earlier, the club face, the rate of rotation is nuts, and they have the ability to get into these crazy swing speeds because of that.
Right, like if I'm gonna really lower the arms, right?
Yep.
I can also meet that with a vertical force, and
Exactly.
there's a lot of power in that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And talking with Kyle Carruthers, who's our strength and conditioning coordinator for our academy, the first thing he does with our junior players is just teaches them how to jump.
Yep.
So that's vertical force.
Totally.
How to lower, how to go up.
Okay.
Which is funny because we think of golf as being
Just rotation.
turn more kind of ideas, right? Well, yeah, you're going to turn, and you don't need a heck of a lot of it. Like
Yeah.
most players, it's very easy to turn 90 degrees, like the shoulder axis 90 degrees.
But a spiral, right, has like rotation, but it also travels upward
It's in a vertical direction.
in a vertical direction.
Exactly,
So-
exactly. So those types of players could be potentially junior athletes, because what we're talking about is, like, if we want to stabilize, well, if we want to lower the rate of rotation in
Yes.
the club face, then what we can do is just shove the pivot point back a little bit. That's completely fine. We can do that, and we can shove it to a lot of different points in space. Like the place that's no good is this lateral pelvic sway. Like if I'm here into 5 and then I just shove my pelvis towards the target, this doesn't look good all of a sudden.
No, it doesn't.
At the same time, if I'm in 5 okay, and I shove my pelvis this way, all of a sudden this doesn't look okay.
Okay, you can overcook either one.
Yeah, so we need some amount of rotation in the pelvis, and that really, this is a different conversation, but that's really because of the upper spiral line and what we see the ribs doing to influence that. But you'll feel, okay, I can have this release, I can have that release. Those are both rotary. The pelvis is rotary there. It's not going side to side. Yes, exactly.
See.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so
more distance, more power. You're looking for probably more of a lead hip release.
Yep.
Where you can generate a little bit more vertical force and let the face flash, because that also increases club head speed a little bit as
Exactly,
well.
exactly. If you're also a player that needs like every bit of distance that you can possibly muster, so we're going to have a ball that needs to launch a little bit higher for you, okay? And the tendency is going to be that it's going to tumble on itself this way, which typically lowers the amount of spin for players. So you're going to have a higher launch, lower spin ball.
And that ball's just,
That's a cannonball.
That's nukes.
Yep, that's nukes.
Yep.
That's that kind of a spectrum because 1, we got the face rotating.
Okay.
Okay. And 2, we're going vertical, so I can unload this earlier in the hands.
Fair.
So now there's the shaft. So I get this higher launch. So there's our dynamic loft.
Okay.
Okay. Players on the other end of spectrum.
Who may be kind of bomb it, hit it a decent ways, but can't keep the ball on a golf course.
There you go. Yep. I need more precision, so I want to lower the rate of rotation.
Okay.
Typically, like those types of players, like if we're playing golf, let's say we're hitting an approach shot. If I have a higher ball speed, the last thing that I really want it to do is like I don't want to lose control of it left, because that typically means long. So I don't want to chip or putt downhill.
Right.
And if I'm long and left, now if I'm a right-handed player, long left with that excessive draw, and I've got a downhill left to right chip, downhill left to right putt, it's out of control this way.
Sure.
Not saying that you can't draw it with a low rate of rotation club face, but it's going to limit how much it tumbles.
Right.
So if you miss, it's a little bit short and it's a little bit right. Okay, that's an uphill right to left putt, uphill right to left chip.
Interesting.
Right, so just the playability of it from a release perspective is that. So these folks that don't have much club speed, if it's really tumbling and the ball is like this higher draw, you're still never going to lose control of it like crazy long left, because the ball's not in the air long enough to do it.
Right.
Okay, so juniors typically lower weight athletes as well. We'll see this. Okay, and that typically is like a shorter player as well. Rory, players on the LPGA Tour compared to the PGA Tour.
Yeah, you'll
see that.
way more lead hip pivots on the LPGA Tour.
Yep, and junior athletes. Okay, so it just depends on what your preference is. And I get some of you are playing and looking at this more from an aesthetic purpose. You want to look a certain way. I get that. Like, we all have that. I mean, I look at my damn golf swing and I go, man, I'm still freaking like doing BS where I don't want to do BS. So this, I think, is an important talk, because we just need the right diagnosis that's healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you shove yourself out into these unhealthy patterns. Typically, unhealthy patterns is we'll see lateral pelvic movement as the main unhealthy pattern, because that leads to like excessive extension and sometimes some excessive side bend because of that, like in spots that we don't want to see it. Side bend, rotation, laterals in the appropriate spots are still okay, but it's just to a certain degree. So like that's a different conversation in its own right. But we're talking just little differences in pivot points that then leak into differences in the direction of the arms, that then leads into release and how the forearms and what we see the golf club doing and where it flashes.
Cool.
Okay, kind of a deep dive. There's probably going to be some questions on this, just your own personal preferences, which, you know, I think each one of us have our own preferences for our own game and what we're looking to create, but as well as, you know, the students that we're fortunate enough to coach. But those preferences come from an individual player by player perspective, right? It's not shove everybody in one frickin' pot, because that has never worked and it's not going to work for you.
In history, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I just can add one thing in here, I mean, like in these videos, we are doing our absolute best to give you, like, this is a lot of information.
Yeah.
As much information as you can possibly have to sort of make an informed decision. on what your release should be, right? But I think there's still going to be a lot of people that watch this and go, I still don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still guessing. Like,
Yeah.
they're gonna go to the range and they're gonna try trail hip and they're gonna try lead hip, and they may just
Yeah.
have struggle with that, right? So
Exactly.
come see us.
Come see us. Like,
come
we
see
do
us.
virtual stuff.
Yeah, we do plenty
TJ
of-
has a wonderful program coming up, a new one coming up that's the Swing Improvement Series. And then on top of that, both Alexes in Arizona are developing a scoring improvement series now that most of us are heading into the summer months for us American players or Northern Hemisphere players. So we're here to help. Again, it's like, especially on our YouTube, like TJ just said, a lot of this is just education. And from that information, then you can start to better diagnose your own game. But we get it. I mean, it's a hard friggin' game, and the golf swing can be extremely complex, especially when you're trying to like understand it at a higher level. And then, you know, as you understand it better and you understand your own game, it becomes simple again. So for it to become simple again, you need the right diagnoses. That's what we're trying to do on this channel and what we do on a daily basis with, again, the students that we're fortunate enough to coach. So thanks so much for following us. We love you to death. Keep us posted on your own games. Ask any questions that you have. We'll see you next time.